The mandrake root, known scientifically as Mandragora officinarum, holds one of the most fascinating and enduring places in the history of medicine and myth, existing at the mysterious boundary between superstition and science, revered as both a dangerous poison and a miraculous cure, and remembered in countless legends that have traveled across continents for thousands of years. Its story begins in the cradle of civilization, among the earliest cultures of Mesopotamia and Egypt, where healers and priests sought to understand the hidden powers of plants. The mandrake's human-like appearance played a critical role in shaping the fear and reverence it inspired. Its thick, forked root often grew in twisted humanoid forms that resembled miniature bodies, sometimes complete with arms, legs, and even what seemed to be facial features. To early people, such uncanny resemblance to the human form could not be dismissed as coincidence, and thus the mandrake was seen as a plant infused with mystical life, bridging the natural and the supernatural. In the Fertile Crescent, clay tablets written in Akkadian and Sumerian make reference to plants believed to contain spirits, and scholars suggest that the mandrake was one of these sacred botanicals, used in rituals involving fertility, protection from evil, and communication with the spirit world. In ancient Egypt, too, the mandrake was associated with love, vitality, and reproduction. In fact, mandrake depictions appear in tomb paintings and amulets, suggesting that its reputation as a lover's charm and aphrodisiac was already firmly established by the 2nd millennium BCE. Egyptian queens and priestesses were said to drink mandrake-infused wine during fertility rites, believing that its essence could unlock the blessings of Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, and motherhood. This symbolic connection to love would endure across cultures for centuries, shaping its reputation as both a medicine and a magical agent. The biblical tradition also records mandrakes, lending them a special significance in Judeo-Christian culture. In the book of Genesis, Leah and Rachel compete for Jacob's affection and for the power to conceive children, with mandrakes at the heart of their rivalry, suggesting that as early as the 1st millennium BCE, these roots were already treasured as fertility charms in the Levant. The Hebrews called them dudaim, and these love apples were believed to hold the key to conception, a belief that spread widely through the ancient Near East. The fruit of the mandrake, small yellow or orange berries with a strong, intoxicating fragrance added to its allure, sweet-smelling and tempting, yet also carrying a potent narcotic effect when consumed in large amounts. The fruit seemed to embody the dual nature of pleasure and danger, life and death. As Greek culture rose to prominence, the mandrake entered the world of mythology with even greater intensity. The Greeks believed that the plant sprang from the ground where drops of semen or blood had fallen, especially associated with the death or suffering of gods and heroes, which reinforced the idea that it was born from both love and violence. The root's supposed scream when pulled from the earth became one of its most enduring legends. Harvesters were warned that the mandrake emitted a deadly shriek when uprooted, a cry so piercing it could kill any human who heard it. To protect themselves, gatherers supposedly tied a hungry dog to the root and lured it away with food, forcing the animal to pull the plant free and die in place of the human collector. Though this dramatic ritual may sound fantastical, it reflects the ancient recognition of the mandrake's real dangers. The plant contains tropane alkaloids, powerful compounds that act as hallucinogens, anesthetics, and poisons, capable of inducing unconsciousness or delirium, but also of causing respiratory failure and death if misused. To ancient minds, such power demanded mythological explanations, and so the scream became a warning, a supernatural representation of the plant's lethal potency. Throughout the Mediterranean basin, mandrake was simultaneously cultivated as a medicine and feared as a cursed object, with rituals of collection often taking place under specific astrological conditions, such as at night under a full moon, to appease spirits and avoid misfortune. In many traditions, the mandrake was also believed to be animated by a spirit or demon. Some legends said the root was nourished by the bodily fluids of the dead, especially blood and semen, which explained its uncanny human shape and its occult force. This belief gave rise to practices of burying mandrakes beneath gallows or execution sites, where the fluids of hanged criminals were thought to feed the plant and cause it to grow more potent. From these grim associations, the mandrake became linked with necromancy, witchcraft, and the boundary between life and death. Yet despite its dangerous aura, it was also treasured for its reputed healing virtues, a paradox that made it both feared and indispensable. Among the Assyrians, Egyptians, and early Greeks, mandrake concoctions were applied as sedatives, fertility tonics, and even charms against evil spirits. Worn around the neck or placed beneath pillows, the root was believed to protect the sleeper, warding off nightmares and malevolent forces, while at the same time inducing vivid dreams and visions. As a result, the mandrake earned a reputation as a gateway to the subconscious, a plant of divination and dream work that could connect mortals to the divine. Over time, this symbolic duality, life and death, love and danger, healing and poison, became the foundation of its mythological identity. The mandrake was not just a plant. It was a living paradox, a natural embodiment of the belief that powerful medicines must always be approached with fear, ritual, and respect. Ancient healers understood that the mandrake could grant relief from pain, bring fertility to the barren, and induce visions of the divine, but only if one mastered its dangers. To mishandle it meant madness or death. Thus, the mandrake's mythology can be seen as an early attempt to encode real pharmacological knowledge within the symbolic language of myth. The screaming root, the deadly harvest, the human form, the love potion, the protective charm. All of these reflect a collective cultural effort to grapple with a plant that was, in truth, both medicine and poison, both wonder and terror. By the time Greek physicians like Hippocrates and Dioscorides began to catalogue its effects, the mandrake was already a creature of legend, shaped by centuries of ritual and story, and it would continue to haunt the imagination of healers, magicians, and storytellers for generations to come. In the world of ancient Greece and Rome, where medicine, philosophy, and natural science began to merge into systematic traditions, the mandrake root assumed a position of profound importance, both as a pharmacological substance and as a cultural symbol, embodying the delicate balance between healing and harm that preoccupied physicians, philosophers, and poets alike. Greek medical authors such as Hippocrates, Theophrastus, and later Dioscorides and Galen regarded the mandrake as a plant of great therapeutic value, albeit one requiring careful dosage and ritual respect, for its narcotic and sedative qualities were as potent as they were dangerous. Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine, referred to the mandrake in his medical writings, recommending it in measured quantities as an analgesic for severe pain, particularly for conditions such as rheumatism and insomnia. The plant's roots and leaves were boiled or soaked in wine to produce an infusion that could calm the nervous system, alleviate suffering, and induce sleep in patients racked by agony. This was no small achievement in a world without modern anesthetics, for the mandrake offered one of the few means available to dull the terror of surgery or to soothe the mind of a restless sufferer. Theophrastus, a student of Aristotle and the father of botany, described in detail the process of harvesting mandrake, carefully noting the plant's appearance and the dangers associated with its collection. He mentioned rituals involving circles drawn around the plant with a sword and incantations whispered to the gods, reflecting the lingering belief that the plant was inhabited by spirits that demanded propitiation. Such descriptions reveal the fascinating interplay between empirical observation and magical tradition in the Greek approach to nature. While Theophrastus catalogued the plant scientifically, he also acknowledged that tradition and ritual could not be easily separated from practice. By the 1st century CE, the physician Dioscorides, whose monumental work De Materia Medica became the most influential pharmacological text of antiquity, offered one of the most detailed medical accounts of the mandrake. He classified it as a powerful soporific, writing that a small amount could lull a patient into sleep and ease the pains of surgery, but an excess could prove fatal. Dioscorides recommended mandrake wine as a surgical anesthetic, one of the earliest documented uses of a natural substance to induce unconsciousness before operations such as amputations or cauterizations, procedures that otherwise would have been excruciating. Roman medical practice, heavily influenced by Greek knowledge, continued to develop these applications. Pliny the Elder, in his encyclopedic natural history, devoted attention to mandrake, acknowledging both its medicinal and magical aspects. He described how juice pressed from the root could be used to relieve pain, but warned against overdoses, that could cause madness, delirium, or death. To mitigate its dangers, Pliny suggested methods of preparation, such as mixing mandrake with wine, honey, or vinegar to reduce its potency, a recognition of the careful balance required when working with such a powerful drug. Beyond its medical uses, the mandrake carried a reputation as a love charm and aphrodisiac in both Greek and Roman culture, largely owing to its biblical and Near Eastern associations with fertility. Roman poets such as Ovid and Virgil alluded to the mandrake in the context of desire, enchantment, and transformation, weaving it into their mythic and romantic imagery. In some traditions, women carried mandrake roots as talismans to increase fertility or to secure the affections of lovers, a practice that blurred the line between medicine and magic. Roman matrons sometimes placed mandrakes beneath their beds, believing that the root's energy could inspire passion or conception. Physicians like Galen, however, sought to strip the plant of purely magical associations and frame it within the rational context of humoral medicine, the dominant medical theory of the time. Within the humoral framework, mandrake was understood to be a cold and moist plant, capable of counteracting excess heat in the body and soothing conditions of overstimulation. As such, it was prescribed for fevers, inflammations, and nervous disorders, as well as for insomnia and mania. Yet Galen, like Dioscorides, warned against reckless use, emphasizing that only the trained physician could administer it safely. The dual nature of the mandrake, medicine and poison, thus became a recurring theme in Greco-Roman thought, echoing the broader philosophical principle that every substance in nature could be either remedy or toxin depending on its dose, a concept later captured in the Paracelsian maxim, "The dose makes the poison." Beyond medicine, Mandrake maintained a strong presence in rituals and folklore across the Greco-Roman world. Soldiers and gladiators sometimes carried mandrake charms, believing the root would protect them in battle or help them recover from wounds. Priests and magicians used mandrake in potions designed for divination or for invoking spirits, reflecting the plant's continuing association with the supernatural. It was also believed that mandrake could ward off evil spirits and curses. Roman households occasionally placed dried mandrake roots among their protective amulets to ensure prosperity and protection from harm. The blending of medicinal, magical, and symbolic functions made mandrake a quintessential example of how ancient peoples approached healing. Science, religion, and folklore were not separate categories but interwoven strands of the same tapestry. Even the Romans' methods of harvesting retained elements of ritual and myth. Pliny the Elder recounted the tale of the mandrake's fatal scream and the use of dogs to uproot it, repeating older Greek traditions, which suggests that despite advances in medical rationalism, the plant's mythological aura remained too strong to dismiss entirely. The ritual of tying a dog to the root persisted into Roman accounts, symbolizing humanity's attempt to control forces that were at once natural and supernatural. Interestingly, Roman medicine also explored the mandrake's psychological effects, recognizing its hallucinogenic properties as both potential tools and risks. Physicians sometimes administered small doses to treat melancholy or hysteria, conditions believed to arise from imbalances of the humors, particularly excess black bile. The plant's ability to induce vivid dreams and altered states of consciousness made it a subject of interest, not only for physicians, but also for philosophers exploring the nature of perception, reality, and the soul. In this sense, mandrake straddled the border between medicine and philosophy, becoming a plant that invited speculation about the relationship between the body, the mind, and the cosmos. As the Roman Empire expanded, and Greek medical texts spread across its territories, the knowledge of mandrake traveled with them, reaching regions as far-flung as Gaul, North Africa, and the Middle East. Roman military doctors carried mandrake preparations in their kits, using them to dull pain in the field, while local populations adopted and adapted these uses into their own healing traditions. Thus, the mandrake became a truly Mediterranean plant of medicine and myth, its roots entwined with the history of empires and the blending of cultures. Yet even at the height of Greco-Roman rationalism, the mandrake never lost its aura of danger and mystery. It remained a plant that demanded ritual respect, whether in the form of incantations whispered by Greek herbalists or protective amulets crafted by Roman households. This enduring ambiguity, at once a legitimate medical drug and a supernatural talisman, reflected the ancient conviction that healing was not merely a technical craft, but a dialogue with forces greater than human understanding. To the Greeks and Romans, the mandrake embodied the truth that medicine was inseparable from philosophy, myth, and religion, a plant that could ease the sufferings of the body while opening portals to the mysteries of the soul. During the long centuries of the Middle Ages and the dawn of the Renaissance, the mandrake root retained its strange and powerful reputation, carried forward from antiquity, but reshaped by Christian theology, medieval superstition, and the new scientific spirit that was beginning to emerge in Europe, creating a unique blend of fear, reverence, and fascination that secured the mandrake's place as one of the most legendary plants in the medical and magical imagination of the West. With the decline of the Roman Empire and the fragmentation of classical learning, much of the ancient knowledge of plants was preserved and transmitted through monastic communities, where monks copied and studied works such as Dioscorides' De Materia Medica, Galen's writings, and Pliny's Natural History. These texts, enriched by commentaries from Arab physicians like Avicenna and Al-Razi, who translated and expanded upon Greek sources, ensured that the mandrake continued to be recognized as a powerful drug, particularly for its sedative and anesthetic properties. Medieval herbals, richly illustrated manuscripts that catalogued plants and their uses, often depicted the mandrake with anthropomorphic roots, emphasizing its resemblance to the human form. Such images reinforced the belief that the plant possessed a soul or spirit, a notion aligned with the medieval doctrine of signatures, which held that the appearance of a plant was a divine sign indicating its therapeutic uses. Since the mandrake looked like a human body, it was believed to cure ailments of the body, enhance fertility, and serve as a substitute for human essence in magical rites. Yet Christian Europe also viewed the mandrake with suspicion for its long-standing associations with magic, love potions, and demonic powers clashed with church teachings. Some theologians warned that the mandrake was the devil's plant, a root animated by infernal forces, and stories circulated that witches used mandrakes in their sorcery to summon spirits, brew flying ointments, or induce visions. The terrifying legend of the mandrake's deadly scream was elaborated during this period, becoming one of the most widespread pieces of folklore in Europe. It was said that when uprooted, the mandrake would shriek so loudly that the sound alone could kill or drive mad anyone who heard it, and thus elaborate rituals were devised for its safe collection. The digger had to cover his ears with wax or cloth, draw 3 protective circles around the plant with a consecrated sword, and employ a black dog or goat to pull it from the earth while the harvester prayed for protection. These rituals, recorded in medieval texts and later repeated in Renaissance herbals, reflect the synthesis of pagan and Christian elements in popular healing practices. The mandrake was still seen as a vessel of supernatural energy, but its dangers could be mitigated through ritual, prayer, and divine intervention. Despite these fears, the mandrake remained an important medicinal plant in medieval pharmacology. Physicians and apothecaries used it in carefully prepared forms, such as mandrake wine or extracts, to treat conditions ranging from insomnia, melancholy, and epilepsy to pain during surgery and childbirth. Surgeons valued mandrake as one of the few substances capable of rendering patients unconscious before operations, combining it with other narcotic herbs like opium, henbane, and hemlock in powerful anesthetic mixtures, sometimes called soporific sponges. A sponge soaked in these infusions would be held over a patient's face to induce sleep, a crude but effective precursor to modern anesthesia. Mandrake was also prescribed for nervous disorders and was thought to quiet the mind of those suffering from madness or hysteria, though overdoses could lead to hallucinations, convulsions, or death, reinforcing its dangerous aura. The mandrake's symbolic role as a fertility charm also persisted throughout the Middle Ages, partly due to its biblical mention in Genesis. Couples struggling to conceive sometimes sought out mandrake roots, carrying them as talismans or placing them beneath beds to increase the likelihood of conception, though the church often frowned upon such practices as remnants of pagan superstition. Indeed, the church's relationship with the mandrake was deeply ambivalent. While condemning its magical associations, it could not ignore its medical efficacy, and thus the plant occupied a liminal space between forbidden magic and tolerated medicine. Stories of mandrakes animated by demonic power flourished in medieval folklore. Some tales described how mandrakes grew beneath gallows, where the semen of hanged men fell to the earth, giving rise to roots shaped like tiny human bodies infused with the restless spirits of the executed. These mandrakes were said to cry out when found and could bring wealth, protection, or disaster to their owners, depending on how they were treated. In Germanic folklore, the alroni was a type of mandrake root kept in a box or wrapped in silk, fed with milk and honey, and believed to bring fortune to its household, though at the cost of eventual damnation. Such stories reveal how deeply the mandrake had become embedded in the magical economy of medieval Europe, serving as a familiar spirit, a protective charm, and a dangerous burden all at once. During the Renaissance, with the revival of classical learning and the flourishing of natural philosophy, the mandrake was re-examined through the lenses of humanism, alchemy, and emerging scientific inquiry. Renaissance herbalists like Otto Brunfels, Leonhard Fuchs, and Pietro Andrea Mattioli reprinted and expanded upon the descriptions of Dioscorides, adding vivid illustrations of mandrakes with distinctly human forms, often male or female, reflecting both botanical curiosity and the lingering fascination with its anthropomorphic qualities. Alchemists and natural philosophers regarded the mandrake as a plant of mystery, one that symbolized the hidden correspondences between man and nature, body and cosmos. In the symbolic language of alchemy, the mandrake was sometimes associated with homunculi, miniature human beings created through mystical or artificial means, further enhancing its reputation as a plant that blurred the boundaries between life and matter. Writers such as Paracelsus, the radical physician and alchemist of the 16th century, speculated about the mandrake's role in the creation of life and its potential as a medium for harnessing natural and spiritual forces. Meanwhile, in popular culture, the mandrake's magical reputation flourished in ballads, folktales, and plays. Shakespeare alluded to it in Romeo and Juliet, where Juliet fears awakening in the tomb and hearing the shrieks like mandrakes torn out of the earth, a vivid testimony to how well known the legend of the screaming root had become by the Elizabethan era. In these centuries, the mandrake embodied the complex interplay between superstition, medicine, and emerging science. It was still used as a narcotic and sedative, still feared as a demonic plant, still treasured as a fertility charm, and still invoked in literature and art as a symbol of mystery and danger. Yet its role was slowly changing, for as Renaissance medicine advanced, with greater emphasis on empirical observation and experimentation, the mandrake's magical aura began to fade. Physicians increasingly sought to measure its effects and classify its properties in systematic ways, while skepticism toward magical explanations grew among intellectuals. Still, among the wider population, mandrake remained a potent object of belief and imagination, proof of how deeply embedded it was in the cultural psyche of Europe. By the end of the Renaissance, the mandrake had become not only a medicinal and magical plant, but also a symbol of the tension between old ways of knowing, superstition, folklore, religious symbolism, and the new scientific methods that were beginning to reshape medicine and natural philosophy. It was a bridge between eras, embodying the fears, hopes, and contradictions of a world in transition from medieval to modern. As the early modern period gave way to the scientific revolution and the development of modern pharmacology, the mandrake root began its slow decline from a central role in medicine and folklore to a shadowy place on the margins of botany and popular imagination. Remembered more for its myths than for its practical utility, yet never fully forgotten, for its peculiar form and storied past ensured that it would continue to haunt the human imagination. The 17th and 18th centuries marked a turning point. As chemistry and anatomy advanced, physicians and scientists began to identify, isolate, and measure the active compounds in plants with increasing precision, and the mandrake, once valued as a universal sedative and fertility charm, was revealed to contain dangerous alkaloids such as hyoscyamine, scopolamine, and atropine, whose unpredictable effects made it less reliable than other medicinal herbs. At the same time, the rise of opium as a more controllable pain reliever and anesthetic diminished the practical need for mandrake in medical practice. Enlightenment physicians criticized the elaborate myths that surrounded the plant, dismissing tales of its deadly scream its demonic origins, and its anthropomorphic soul as superstitious relics of a less rational age. Yet the mandrake's decline in medicine only seemed to enhance its reputation in folklore, magic, and literature, where it became a symbol of the uncanny, the forbidden, and the mysterious. Stories of mandrakes found beneath gallows, fed with milk by superstitious peasants, and kept as talismans of wealth and protection persisted well into the 18th and 19th centuries, particularly in rural Germany, France, and England. These Alron figures, half plant, half human, served as household familiars in folklore, capable of bringing fortune to their owners, but also demanding care and secrecy, lest they turn malevolent. In many cases, mandrake-like charms were not even true mandrake roots, but carved roots of other plants, such as bryony, fashioned into human shapes and sold by cunning folk to gullible clients eager for magical assistance. This practice reflected both the fading availability of real mandrakes in northern climates and the enduring demand for their legendary power. Meanwhile, literature and art embraced the mandrake as a potent symbol of forbidden knowledge and dark enchantment. Renaissance writers like Machiavelli wrote plays about the mandrake's powers in love and lust, while later authors, from Goethe to Victor Hugo, invoked its eerie qualities to heighten themes of passion, death, and the supernatural. In Shakespeare's time, the mandrake was already a cultural shorthand for terror and magic, and this symbolic resonance continued into Romanticism, when fascination with folklore and the occult revived interest in the plant. Painters and illustrators depicted mandrakes as grotesque humanoid figures, torn screaming from the ground, embodying both the beauty and horror of nature's mysteries. By the 19th century, the mandrake's medical role had nearly vanished from serious pharmacology, though it lingered in folk medicine as a remedy for rheumatism, insomnia, and fertility, and in esoteric traditions as a magical tool for divination, protection, and necromancy. Occultists such as the French writer Eliphas Lévy, and later the members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, included the mandrake in their compendiums of magical plants, describing its role in rituals of transformation, astral travel, and spirit communication. The anthropomorphic root, with its haunting human form, made it a natural emblem for such practices, a living link between man and plant, matter and spirit. In popular superstition, mandrakes continued to be treated as semi-human beings. Some believed that they screamed when burned, others that they could move or cry at night, and many believed that to mistreat a mandrake would invite misfortune or death. In some European villages, carved mandrake roots were still passed down as heirlooms, associated with prosperity, fertility, or protection against illness. With the rise of colonial botany and global exploration, European scientists also encountered related plants in the nightshade family, such as American mandrakes, Podophyllum peltatum, which further blurred the distinction between myth and science, as mandrake became a name applied to multiple plants with very different properties. Yet it was the symbolic, rather than the botanical identity of mandrake that endured most powerfully. In the 20th century, mandrake became an enduring feature of literature, cinema, and eventually modern fantasy. Writers like J.K. Huysmans in his decadent novel Laba referenced mandrakes in their depictions of occult rituals, while modernist poets used it as a symbol of eroticism and danger. The plant reappeared in Gothic fiction as a sinister talisman, often connected with witchcraft, execution, and the demonic. Perhaps most famously, the mandrake entered global popular culture through J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, where the screaming roots, pulled from pots with protective earmuffs, echo the medieval legend of the deadly cry, and reintroduce the plant to a new generation of readers as both terrifying and whimsical. In this way, mandrake has become one of the few plants to survive in the cultural imagination across 4 millennia, moving from the sacred gardens of Mesopotamia to the stages of Elizabethan theatre, to the classrooms of modern fantasy fiction. Even in the realm of modern science, the mandrake has not entirely vanished, for its alkaloids, though too toxic for casual use, are chemically related to substances still employed in medicine, such as atropine used in ophthalmology to dilate pupils, and scopolamine, used to prevent motion sickness and as a sedative. Thus, the mandrake's legacy persists in the pharmacological family of drugs derived from the nightshade plants, a reminder that beneath the myth and superstition lay genuine chemical power. More broadly, The mandrake has endured as a symbol of the ambiguous relationship between humanity and nature. It represents both the promise of healing and the threat of harm, the fascination with lifelike forms in the natural world, and the persistent human desire to see in plants not just physical matter but spiritual meaning. In folklore, it embodies the idea that powerful gifts must be approached with caution, respect, and ritual. In literature, it functions as a metaphor for hidden truths and dangerous knowledge. In medicine, it stands as an early example of the blurred boundary between remedy and poison. Today, though no longer prescribed by doctors or sought after in village marketplaces, the mandrake root survives in stories, symbols, and scholarly histories as a plant that has shaped human imagination for millennia. It is a testament to the enduring power of myth to preserve fragments of ancient experience. For behind the screaming legends and fertility charms lay a real plant, with real effects, discovered by early healers who struggled to make sense of its potency. The mandrake's decline as a medicine is thus not the end of its story, but rather a transformation. From drug to myth, from practical remedy to cultural icon. Even now in modern occult practices and fantasy fiction, the mandrake continues to be summoned, its human-like root whispering of the strange intimacy between man and plant, science and superstition, medicine and magic. It is this capacity to live simultaneously in the world of fact and the world of imagination that has made the mandrake immortal, not in the fields where it once grew, but in the collective memory of humanity, where it will remain forever as a root that is not just dug from the earth, but from the deepest soil of our shared cultural consciousness.